Under the twin suns of Verexis Prime, the Colosseum loomed like a monument to violence and glory. Carved from obsidian rock and etched with the blood crests of fallen champions, it had stood for over 5 centuries as the proud heart of the Galactic Dominion's military culture. It was here that conquests were celebrated, here that challengers were crushed beneath the heel of supremacy. And today, here that something unthinkable would unfold. 7 feet tall, Commander Vrathar of the Dominion's Honor Guard stood alone at the center of the arena. His obsidian exoskeleton shimmered under the harsh spotlight of 1,000 drones. Not a single crack marred the chitin armor that had deflected blaster bolts, resisted plasma blades, and emerged victorious in over 100 campaigns. 4 arms, each with serrated plating and bone-hardened musculature, flexed in rhythmic anticipation. The ceremonial skulls of extinct war beasts hung from his shoulder pauldrons like trophies from a forgotten age. Vrathar was not merely a soldier. He was a living symbol of Dominion dominance, a biological weapon engineered through millennia of selective breeding and combat optimization. Around him, 50,000 multigenic spectators, from vaporous Nuvax to the crystalline Zerothi, roared with admiration and bloodlust. But this was no blood match. Not officially. The contest had been declared a ceremonial exhibition, a welcoming rite for the newest sentient race admitted into the Galactic Collective, a demonstration of strength, not a battle to the death, a courtesy really, a formality extended to emerging species to educate them in the natural order, the Dominion's natural order. The opponent, as announced, was a representative of the newly uplifted species from Sector 9R3, known colloquially as Earth. Primitive bipeds, lacking natural armor, no venom sacs, no claws, no tail-balancing appans. Stage, no heat-shedding dorsal fins, no ultraviolet vision. They could barely even breathe in variable atmospheres, and yet they had survived on a Class 3 death world teeming with geological violence, apex predators, and environmental chaos. Curiously, they had advanced rapidly from stone tools to orbital platforms in under 5,000 cycles, a blip by galactic standards. Vrathar didn't care about their history. He didn't need to. This was theater. The humans were to offer their bravest, and he would demonstrate mercy and dominance, a controlled victory, an exhibition of power and restraint. The announcer's voice crackled across the arena, representing the species known as Homo sapiens. Meera Chen, age 13, standard cycles. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Vrathar's secondary eyes narrowed. Perhaps he had misheard the translation. But no, the gate across from him hissed open, and from the shadowed tunnel stepped a child. She stood perhaps 5 feet tall, her slight figure draped in a simple white combat gi. No armor, no augmentations. Her skin, soft and unprotected. Her face calm, unreadable. A black belt cinched tightly around her waist, and her long dark hair was tied back with meticulous care. She did not run. She did not tremble. She walked with deliberate pace, bowed first to Vrathar, then turned and bowed once more, this time to the royal box of Dominion overseers. A silence fell like a curtain. Ambassador Trelvar of the Dominion's diplomatic corps sputtered from the dignitary's booth, his voice laced with indignation. "This is an affront, a violation of engagement protocols. They send a larval stage juvenile to mock our traditions? This is no warrior. It is a diplomatic insult." Beside him, the human ambassador remained seated, expression serene. The invitation said, "Send your representative. Meera is ours." Vrathar's mandibles clicked in agitation. He raised his upper left arm and signaled his objection through official combat sign language. "I will not engage an underdeveloped human larva." His translator broadcast the message across the arena in a dozen languages. The arena trembled beneath the outrage of scandalized spectators. Protocol, honor, and logic had all been defied. But then the overseer of the match, a six-eyed ancient Vornian general, stood from the royal dais. "The humans have declared this representative. The combat shall proceed. Commander, do your duty." Vrathar hesitated, but only for a breath. Orders were orders. He lowered his stance. His upper right arm raised, ready for a fast, disabling strike. Enough to subdue, enough to win. Without inflicting true harm. He was no butcher. "Begin," the overseer commanded. Vrathar moved instantly, a blur of motion faster than most species could perceive. His taloned fingers extended in a strike aimed at the child's shoulder, designed to jar the nervous system and drop her unconscious in less than half a second. It never landed. Meera moved like vapor, sidestepping the blow as if she'd rehearsed this moment in 1,000 dreams. With no fear, no aggression, only calm. She grasped his outstretched limb, small fingers wrapping around hardened carapace, and pivoted at the waist, hips rotating with flawless precision. A fluid redirection of force. Vrathar's momentum became his downfall. He was airborne. The arena gasped. His body slammed into the floor with bone-jarring impact. Cracks spiderwebbed across the obsidian tile beneath him. One of the exoskeletal plates on his back split, venting a hiss of internal coolant into the air. He tried to rise, but before he could, Meera transitioned, her body a blur of training, balance, and anatomical mastery. She locked his arm between her knees and pressed with just the right angle onto a nerve bundle near his elbow joint, one that even most Dominion physicians barely understood. Vrathar's limbs spasmed involuntarily. 3 seconds. That was all it had taken. "Yield. See young," he said. It wasn't a demand. It was a whisper. Calm. Clinical. Lethal in its simplicity. Pain shot through his system like a plasma lance. "I yield," he gasped, mandibles twitching in humiliation. The arena fell deathly silent. Then chaos erupted. Some species screamed, others rose in disbelief. Diplomats shouted. Vornian aides scrambled for their datapads, trying to understand what had just transpired. News drones spun madly, catching every frame of the match for instant galactic distribution. In the silence that followed, the view screens replayed the moment, again and again. The throw, the lock, the yield, the moment the myth of human inferiority died. Meera stood slowly, releasing the commander's arm without flourish. She bowed, first to her opponent, still gasping in confusion on the arena floor, and then once more to the overseers. Dignity, precision, control. Not a word was spoken. Not a muscle trembled. She walked back to her gate, the arena parting before her in stunned silence. In the observation chamber above, Dominion analysts pored over slow-motion footage, anatomy overlays, and telemetry from Vrathar's battle harness. "How?" one of them whispered. That was not a psychic field. No implants. No kinetic enhancers. It was leverage, another responded grimly. She used his momentum, redirected his center of gravity. Standard Earth physics. Trelvar stormed into the diplomatic lounge moments later, mandibles twitching furiously. "That child," he seethed, "used forbidden techniques from the Quarian War Codex. That lock was based on classified Dominion combat data. How could a pre-galactic species even know such things?" The human ambassador raised an eyebrow, sipping a strange green liquid from a glass of Terran origin. "Quarian techniques," he said politely. "You mean that hold. It's called Ude Garami. Humans call it the entangled arm lock. Part of a martial discipline developed on Earth over 400 years ago. Judo." "Judo?" the ambassador hissed. "This is sorcery. Biological mimicry." She knew Vrathar's anatomical weaknesses. The human smiled. "She's a third-degree black belt. That means she's been training since before your files even noted Earth civilization. Our children study biomechanics and xenobiology before most of your species finish larval stage development. Meera finds non-human anatomy fascinating. She studies it as a hobby." The Vornian overseer had been silent until now. His massive eyes flicked from the human to the holoscreen, where Meera knelt quietly on the floor of her private chamber, meditating as if the entire galactic order hadn't shifted around her. "You sent a child into an arena of blood sport," he said, "and she won." "We sent a representative," the ambassador replied calmly, "and she understood the stakes." Outside the diplomatic wing, the galactic networks buzzed. The footage was replayed billions of times across the interstellar meshnet. 3 seconds to submission, read one headline. Dominion commander felled by human child. Strength is not what you think. On Earth, children gathered in martial arts dojos across continents, watching their new galactic representative bow respectfully after defeating a war-hardened behemoth. On Dominion worlds, protests. Teas broke out. Some demanded an investigation into human genetic manipulation. Others accused the Dominion of weakening. Many called for retaliation. In the shadows of power, more subtle forces stirred. The Dominion's Grand Stratarch met in secrecy 3 cycles later. Military commanders, intelligence ministers, gene cult leaders, and social behaviorists gathered in a chamber carved beneath the acid mountains of Helcor Prime. This was not a combat anomaly, stated General Kairos of the Dominion's Strategic Intelligence Bureau. This was a reconnaissance action, a demonstration of concept. That child was not only trained to fight, she was trained to dismantle, to read anatomy, predict patterns, control outcomes. Control? Asked one minister. Yes, Kairos nodded. Control without brute force, through understanding. A silence settled, the kind of silence that usually preceded war. Back on Earth, Meera Chen returned to her school in New Kyoto Colony. Nestled between twin ridges of the Himalayan reclamation zone, she trained as usual. She studied her calculus, xenobiology, and orbital mechanics. She meditated each morning and helped her grandmother tend the rooftop greenhouse. To her, the match had simply been an application of principles. Balance, momentum, breath. She did not think of herself as a warrior, but across the galaxy her name was being whispered by military theorists, planetary governors, and intelligence analysts, not as a fluke, not as a prodigy, but as a warning. Humanity had not survived its death world by accident. It had done so through study, through adaptation, through the quiet, terrible brilliance of learning how the world worked and then bending it to its will. The Dominion's first response was subtle. They sent observers, historians, scientists, cultural anthropologists. They walked Earth's cities, observed its training academies, studied its sports and schools, and what they saw chilled them to their marrow. Children sparring with synthetic opponents 3 times their size. Students dissecting Dominion species models with pinpoint precision. Teenagers solving gravitational anomalies in orbit using only whiteboards and discipline. Soldiers training in zero-G arenas, mastering fluid dynamics of movement. It wasn't that Earth had one Meera. It was that Earth had millions of them. Some not yet awakened to their potential, others already surpassing it. In the Dominion Council chamber, an emergency session convened. Ambassador Trelvar, still shaken by the public humiliation, addressed the assembly. We have underestimated them. Their strength is not in weaponry or war fleets, it is in the way they think. They train their children to understand systems, biological, mechanical, emotional. They study everything. The High Overseer, draped in the royal flesh banners of the ancestor kings, clicked slowly. And what do you recommend, Ambassador? We should isolate them, delay further integration, control the spread of their knowledge. But others had already drawn different conclusions. What if they are not our enemies? Asked Counselor Varaxa of the Syntheon Clade. What if they are our future? Murmurs of dissent followed, but the idea had been seeded. Because no matter how the Dominion twisted it, the match had been real. It had followed every protocol. There had been no cheating, no manipulation, only mastery. And as the replay continued on silent loops across every Dominion archive, one truth stood unavoidable. It had to run. Taken only 3 seconds to dismantle 500 years of military myth, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Across the outer colonies of the Galactic Dominion, recruitment officers faced an unexpected crisis. New enlistees, inspired by the arena defeat, had begun to ask questions, dangerous ones. If a human child can best a commander, what does that say about our training? Why don't we study like the Terrans do? The Dominion's traditional methods, brutality, repetition, obedience, were no longer unquestioned. On planets like Gravelex and Runtor, cadets secretly shared decrypted Terran footage, watching Meera's match over and over again. They analyzed her stance, her breathing, her footwork. Some attempted to replicate it, others failed, but something had shifted. Curiosity had taken root. In a military culture built on unquestioning strength, the idea that knowledge could overpower brawn was heresy. In the cold chambers of Dominion High Command, this philosophical fracture was being dissected with surgical precision. On Earth, the news cycle moved quickly, as always. Meera returned to relative anonymity, protected under layers of interstellar diplomatic shielding and media blackout protocols. Her identity was classified, her family relocated to a secure compound on Luna Prime. Her match had become both inspiration and threat. In underground message boards and encrypted human networks, rumors swirled that Meera had been genetically enhanced, that she had been trained by black-budget Terran military factions, that her performance had been part of a psychological operation against the Dominion. All false. The truth was far more unsettling. Meera was simply one of many. Dr. Yanis Karova, a cognitive engineer working with Earth's Interstellar Intelligence Task Force, explained it best in a closed-door symposium with Terran leaders. It wasn't about power. It was about understanding. Meera didn't beat Vrathar because she was stronger. She beat him because she understood his biology, his psychology, and the laws of physics. That's what makes humans so dangerous in this galactic ecosystem. She paused, clicking through simulation footage. We're not the fastest, not the strongest. We don't have claws or poison or bone armor, but we learn, relentlessly, and we adapt that learning into application faster than any other known species. She let the final slide hang on the screen. Learning is our apex predator. The Dominion responded in stages. Stage 1 was containment. Trade protocols were adjusted. Earth was granted observer status in military forums, but not full access. Certain data streams were redirected. Surveillance probes increased exponentially, though cloaked in scientific cooperation. Stage 2 was replication. In secret Dominion academies, they began experimenting with Terran-style training modules, fluid mechanics, leverage theory, anatomical dissection, even emotional cognition. They had to know, was Meera an outlier, or just the first drop of a storm? Stage 3 was countermeasures. Bioweapon specialists were commissioned to study human vulnerabilities. Cultural engineers developed programs to sow discord on Earth, political destabilization, social media influence, memes designed to fracture global unity. But none of it worked, because the humans were watching, learning again. In the shadow of Saturn's outer orbit, aboard a neutral research station called Nexus 12, an unexpected diplomatic summit was called. Representatives from 6 major species, Dominion, Terran, Vornian, Synthari, Alvac, and Yuin, met in secret to discuss the implications of what some were calling the Meera precedent. The human representative, Admiral Corin Dak, an aging war historian and linguist, spoke first. We sent a child because it was an exhibition, not a duel to the death. But what you saw was not a trick. It was our truth. The Alvac diplomat, a mist being composed of molecular intelligence, shifted nervously. And how many others like her do you have? Corin smiled. More than you want to know, and fewer than we'd like. The Dominion representative stiffened. This was never about war. Neither was the match, Corin replied. But you learned something from it, didn't you? The room was silent. Back on Earth, the effect of the arena match spread deeper than diplomacy or defense. Universities created entire programs around galactic biomechanics. Children began studying alien species not as curiosities, but as puzzle sets, systems to be understood and, when necessary, neutralized. Dojo masters updated their training modules to include off-world physics. Military academies introduced courses in multi-species psychology, body language decryption, and resonance-based speech defense. Earth, as a culture, didn't just celebrate Meera's victory, it absorbed it. Humans had always had a gift for storytelling. Now those stories were being told with a new purpose. 3 seconds became a phrase whispered in elite circles, a kind of code, a legend, a warning, a promise. 2 Dominion cycles later, on a barren training moon orbiting Sarathal 3, a new generation of Dominion warriors was assembled under a secret program called Project Graveturn. The initiative's goal, train elite soldiers in Earth-based martial logic, blending Dominion strength with Terran technique. The results were catastrophic. Half the recruits washed out during the first phase, unable to unlearn centuries of brute training. Of those who remained, most resisted the psychological shifts required: humility, precision, awareness. These were not Dominion virtues, only a handful adapted. One, Cadet Varks, was later quoted in a confidential report. The humans don't fight like us. They listen to movement, they see balance, they don't overpower, they understand. Every gesture they make is a converse. Asian with physics. We use force, they use choice. The report was buried, but not everyone buried their fear. In the criminal underworld, Meera's match sparked darker fires. Black market arenas sought to clone her genetic sequence. Rogue militaries requested psychological blueprints. Pirate clans placed bounties on Terran martial masters, hoping to extract the secret. There was no secret. There was only study and time. And Earth had already begun teaching its children how to dismantle a galaxy. The Dominion was not the only power unsettled by the match. The Synthari Confederacy, an alliance of machine-based consciousnesses known for their cold detachment and logic-based governance, ran millions of simulations following Meera's victory. Their neural prediction cores returned results that were quietly classified under Tier Omega, existential threat forecasts. The conclusion was mathematically inescapable. If left unmonitored, the human species, despite initial physical disadvantages, will surpass current galactic powers in strategic dominance within 300 cycles. Probability of cultural absorption, 92%. Probability of military parity, 61%. Probability of complete mimetic saturation via ideological artifacts, 87%. In simpler terms, the humans didn't need fleets to conquer the stars. They only needed stories and ideas and time. Meanwhile, in Earth's underground diplomatic schools, the hidden academies where future planetary negotiators were trained, new protocols were quietly added to the curriculum. These lessons weren't taught in lecture halls or shared in textbooks. They were whispered in soundproof chambers, etched into locked neural records. Respect the game, not the appearance. No species is primitive when it has studied pain. The most dangerous opponent is the one who listens before they move. Each phrase encoded an experience, a method, a posture of engagement rooted not in dominance, but in observation, in understanding. These schools began to produce a new breed of Terran ambassador, hybrid diplomat warriors, trained in galactic law and post-Newtonian physics, fluent in 7 alien dialects, capable of de-escalating a war over a cup of tea, or ending one with a whisper and a wrist lock. Back on Dominion Core World Veraxis Prime, Vrathar sat alone in his rehabilitation chamber. His back had healed. The exoskeletal fracture was repaired with polymer grafts, but the deeper wound, the one to his legacy, remained. He watched the footage again, Meera's pivot, her breathing, the precise torque of her hips during the throw. He had lost to a child, yes, but more than that, he had lost to an idea. Vrathar had been trained to anticipate brute strength, explosive aggression, but she had offered none, only stillness, and then the inevitable redirection of his own power against him. She had seen him before he saw himself. For the first time in his life, Commander Vrathar requested books, Terran books, physiology manuals, combat theory. He asked to be assigned to a Terran liaison. He began studying the Terran languages, not just the sounds but the subtleties, the meaning behind the motions. His fellow commanders mocked him, until he beat them, one by one. Not with brutality, but with silence, with timing, with understanding, and when they asked him how, he said only, "I listened." The Galactic Order did not collapse after Meera's victory. Empires did not fall overnight, but a tremor had moved through the foundation. A rebalancing had begun, quiet, inexorable. In the border worlds, Terran advisors were requested by planetary governors. In the outer rings, Terran engineers began revolutionizing starship shielding based on principles that Dominion physicists had ignored as folk science. In the academic circuits, galactic universities invited human scholars to lecture on strategy, emotion, even storytelling. And everywhere the humans went, they brought two things: curiosity, a memory of 3 seconds that had echoed through the bones of giants. On a moon orbiting the binary stars of Centaurus IV, a private duel took place. No cameras, no audience, no drones. Vrathar stood on one side. On the other, a human child named Lei, 9 years old, student of Meera's former dojo. The two bowed, then moved. This time, Vrathar did not underestimate. He moved like liquid steel, but with restraint. He offered her traps, not of violence, but of expectation. Lei moved like a dancer. The match lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, they were both on the ground. Lei pinned, gasping. Vrathar's primary left arm twisted back in submission. A draw. They stood. They bowed, and the former Dominion warlord placed his hand on the child's shoulder. "Thank you," he said. She smiled. "No problem." At the edge of the galaxy, in the ruins of a long-dead star empire, a meeting took place that would never be recorded. 12 sentient species, 12 leaders. They spoke of the future. They spoke of Earth, and for the first time, not as an anomaly, but as an equal. One of the Vornian elders, whose kind had watched civilizations rise and burn, closed the gathering with a single sentence. The child did not defeat the commander. Humanity defeated a myth. No one spoke, because they knew it was already true. Back on Earth, Meera Chen sat under the stars. She had just turned 15. She no longer trained to fight. She trained to understand. The stars above her no longer seemed like unknown lights in the dark. They were witnesses to a story still being written, to a galaxy being rebalanced, to a future forged not by muscle or metal, but by thought and balance and choice. And in those distance, across that sky, on dozens of worlds, children of other species were watching her match, studying her throw, learning the path of breath and pivot. They were preparing, because the myth of the strongest had died, and a new truth had risen in its place. Understanding is the ultimate weapon, and humanity, once dismissed as fragile animals from a violent world, had mastered it in 3 seconds, and everything changed. As galactic fear of humanity spreads, factions within the Dominion attempt a preemptive strike, targeting Earth's dojo academies and intelligence hubs. But it's too late. Humanity isn't just prepared, they're already inside. The war that follows isn't fought in space, but in minds, tactics, and timing. And Meera? She vanishes from public view, becoming legend, a ghost operating behind every major peace treaty and assassination. She becomes the blade inside the silence, and the galaxy realizes far too late. The humans didn't come to join. They came to win. Plus, subscribe and like.